So hi, everybody, and thank you, Oksana, for the introduction. So as Oksana mentioned, I teach in the Cinema Studies department, and I was very interested in some turn of the century and early 21st century experiments with artificial intelligence. And particularly artists who were working with what we would now call prototypical examples of artificial intelligence or DIY or kind of their own makeshift versions of artificial intelligence. But in order to gain access to many of those turn of the century visionary experiments, I had to do some media historiography and some kind of revival of this now old complex media. So I'm going to talk from a theory practice perspective and talk a little bit about a creative project slash resource that I launched this past year with the help of my university, the University of Cambridge, and my assistant, Kim. So I'll try to cover the main facets. So the first inspiration for this project was the notion of expressive AI. And this has provided kind of the incentive for filling in specific gaps in existing AI scholarship and practice from a film and media studies perspective. So according to cinematic AI pioneer Michael Mateas, the co-creator of one of the first AI interactive stories, which you can still play online, expressive AI refers to the combination of AI art practice and scientific research that combine the, quote, thought experiments of the AI researcher with the conceptual and aesthetic experiments of the artist. So this so-called knowing by making process blurs the boundaries between art and scientific inquiry, stimulates new research questions, provides a different perspective on old questions, for instance, regarding the human and post-human sensorium and so on, and enables new forms of artistic expression that could also lead to scientific and technological breakthroughs. So what is unique about this intersection between AI and creative theory practice is that instead of focusing on technological fetishism, utopian or dystopian notions of dis and re-embodiment, early expressive AI from the late 90s and early 2000s addresses complex sociopolitical issues. Now, the interactive, performative, and ephemeral aspects of these complex multimedia AI experiments, along with the fact that they're often very difficult to access, archive, emulate, and remediate, have resulted in a significant deficit in historical and critical attention because they're not as widely accessible anymore. So for this reason, me and my assistant, Kim, wanted to launch a creative web project called Expressive AI, and you have the URL on there, that would function as a point of access to diverse examples of creative AI at the intersection of art, science, and civic engagement, to provide an educational resource and a virtual platform for future collaborations between activist-minded contributors and their respective communities. And you can see here, we are adding more and more resources. It's also crowdsourced, so anybody can contribute their own work or can refer us to somebody else's work, and we give them credit. And the archive has been growing. So the objective for the multi-step archival and historiographical project is threefold. So first, it's meant to function as a point of access to diverse examples of creative AI. Second, to provide a wide array of AI critical histories and histories of embodiment, disembodiment, re-embodiment, object-oriented subjectivity, and so on. And that's meant to counter the typically ahistorical approach to AI by commercial industries. And the third objective is to provide an educational resource and a virtual platform for collaborations across different disciplines, different artists and scholars, and so on. So creating such a resource has not only been a challenging practical endeavor, but also a critical one, as it has involved grappling with issues such as access, inclusion, preservation of complex multimedia, how to curate it for a different kind of more contemporary audience, also trying to avoid certain hierarchical ways of curating information. And we're still we were working with limited resources for this particular website that now also has, it has can you see my browser? Yes, okay, perfect. So now it has branched out also into a cargo website that's interactive, and you can navigate different examples, international examples of artificial intelligence in cinema. And then you use the different themes, keywords to reconfigure the database, because we didn't want to make it hierarchical. And the next step, sorry, should I change I got an invitation to join the panel. The breakout room, yes? Oksana, are we leaving?
No, we are here. We are listening.
Okay, just says join breakout room. Okay, I'll ignore it. Okay, so yeah, so this is one kind of iteration of a non-hierarchical archive and repository of different examples of artificial intelligence in cinema that can be reconfigured depending on what you're looking for. And you can navigate, for instance, by region, by different themes, by kind of historical period, and so on. And this has been an ongoing, growing project. So an additional resource. And the three main artists that we started with for the Expressive AI website have been critically working with AI, machine learning, robotics, computational tools, and other then emerging technologies before these were mainstream and corporate in relation to technology. And this is one of her first AI prototypes, I would say, creative works, called Agent Ruby, that started as an installation, and now it has been preserved actually as an interactive online version where you can ask the AI different questions to get a sense of its intelligence and so on. So this was a turn of the century pioneering work that then also branched out into Dina, an artificial intelligent agent, back in 2004, that was also connected at that time to the World Wide Web, and was interacting with information that was online to generate different responses on the spot to users' questions. And it was also voice activated. So something to think about in terms of the different configurations and imaginings of AI. And sometimes sound is not discussed as much, or it's not as interactive, but this is one of those examples that incorporated sound into the embodied experience with the AI. And another very interesting artist is Toni Dove. She's a multimedia artist who always works on hybridity at the intersection of film, performance, and embodied technology. In her work, performers and participants interact with an unfolding narrative using interface technologies such as motion sensors, sometimes other prosthetics, and they interact with different kinds of avatars. And if we have time, I'll play a very short clip. This is from her latest work, The Dress That Eats Souls, that is kind of a continuation of ongoing preoccupations in her practice, and it incorporates robotics to mimic the viewer's body, and the viewer puts on virtual, or in a surrogate way, this armor, and they get transported to different decades of the past, and also the near or the far future. And it's very, very elaborate and a great.
I'm watching you. How you move will decide what you see. If you let me, I'll tell my story with your body. Now move your head right to left. Do you feel it? You are wearing me. You are inside me, inside the dress. See what I can do?
So, and if you're interested on expressive AI, we have more elaborate demos and discussions of this work. So Tony Duff was another artist that kind of contributed a different notion of what embodiment could be, and also visualized this idea of the body working in sync with new technologies, and technology becoming a surrogate for specific, initially human-oriented desires. So very interesting work. And the last of the three main artists that are featured on the website is Paul Van Oos. So Paul Van Oos, since the 90s, alongside some of his collaborators, has been developing AI-oriented participatory multimedia projects, such as what you see in the background, the terminal time that was running from 1999 to 2000, and we have revived it a few years ago, which you can watch on the website, and the consensual fantasy engine. And these early versions of what we would now call interactive documentaries have carved new techno-scientific ground in not only documentary film practices, but also interactive media, embodiment, and so on. So these projects stem from the concept of creating branching video documentaries that would change depending on the consensus or the majority vote of the audience that came through clapping and using an applause meter to measure kind of the most enthusiastic option for the AI engine to select. So the consensual fantasy engine uses AI algorithms and audience polling to combine clips from a database of popular films into different configurations of the outcome of the O.J. Simpson trial, something that captivated the US public. Terminal time that you see in the backdrop is a history engine that combines ideological rhetoric, historical events, documentary conventions, consumer polls, and AI software to generate a different version of history each time. And if I have time, I'll play a very short clip just to give you an idea.
Combining mass participation, real-time documentary graphics, and artificial intelligence to bring to the screen the history the viewers deserve. Each half-hour cinematic experience has 3 sections, punctuated by questions to the audience. But first, the introduction.
With every new day, a new chronicle of history is born, arising from the ultimate design of the universe. Yet, there is not the slightest theoretical importance in a collection of facts or sequence of facts. unless they mean something in terms of reason, unless we can hope to determine their vital connection in the whole system of reality.
We, as citizens of history, are obliged to make and to be made by this system of reality. Since the beginning, and until the end of time.
Terminal time stories are constructed by an artificial intelligence system that responds to viewer input as measured by an applause meter. The first section covers the years 1000 to 1750 AD.
What is the most pressing issue facing the world today? A. People are forgetting their cultural heritage. B. Machines are becoming smarter than people. C. It's getting harder to earn a living.
Okay, so you kind of get the the idea from this short clip of how audience participation was incorporated into the unfolding narrative and then weaved into the ideology of the documentary or mockumentary that was generated by the AI. So by challenging the freedom of choice that interactive technology supposedly offered to consumers, and back in the 90s, you know, there was even more hype around the democratization of media, the fusion of consumption and production, the rise of the user, and so on. So these works by Paul Vanus and his collaborators immerse the audience into a powerful critique of democratic systems, corporate data gathering, standardized consumer profiling, and complicit surveillance, issues that are now even more resonant as we talk about new technologies. And in recent years, there have been more and more artists and activists who want to critically use diverse aesthetics for AI and to allow machines to become co-creators in ways that benefit non-profit sectors, as well as artists such as Afrofuturist artist Netris Gaskins that creatively hack or repurpose existing corporate AI platforms, such as Google's Deep Dream, as you see here, in order to propose counter arguments or different visions of the technology that is used by the mainstream. And in Gaskins's case, who has helped us with some of the design of our own website, she brings attention through this hacking of Google's technology to critical issues such as labor, gender, race, hidden histories, and marginalized kind of targets of technology, and so on. So critical uses of technology, such as this one, they raise questions of who counts, who is being counted, and who is left behind in the race for technological advancement. And also, you know, as you see, these are just a very small sample of some books that have come out that some of the artists kind of engage in a creative dialogue with, that discuss machine bias, sort of programmed inequality, and so on. And so on the other end of the spectrum, we have artists who are responding in their own way creatively to these ongoing debates regarding the ethics of technology, and also embodiment as not always something empowering, but also as a form of enslavement, and as a form of forced intellectual colonization, and so on. So these are some of the theoretical kind of context that we have included on expressive AI in order to kind of try to provide a more comprehensive overview of the ethics of different embodied creative practices, and so on. And you're going to find more examples on the website. We try to trace different cinematic traditions of the AI popular imaginary, some early experiments with computers and with other technologies that at the time were emerging, and so on. And I think I am running probably out of time. Maybe we have more time. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oksana, can you please unmute?
Okay, sorry. We are pretty close to the end.
Okay.
I'm just wondering about one of the participants of our panel, Claire Briache, if she is here. If not, we still have some time, but she is missing, as I understood.
I will look for her if she's not here.
Okay, so we still have a bit of time, or she,
Okay.
or she will come.
Okay, sure. I'm almost at the end. There are a lot of other things, but maybe I'll save some to see if there are any questions during the Q&A. But I basically wanted to use this forum to introduce some new projects, to introduce some artists that are very noteworthy, and also to contribute from my background in film and media studies, and to talk about the role of media archaeology in terms of adding new facets of history that maybe we haven't considered as much before. So if you get a chance to access Expressive AI, please feel free to leave your feedback or any contributions. And that's it. Thank you, everybody. Oh, Oksana, you're on mute.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And if the audience has questions, you can ask Marina, and also you can write your questions in the chat that she can read it, and if not in person right now, but to answer later. No questions. I see one hand. Yeah, please.
Hello. It's an interesting project. I just would like to know a little bit more about how the platform works. All the content is crowdsourced, and you are just putting some filters, or is, I don't know, or you have some kind of reviews schema? What can be stored?
Yeah, so some no, the content was part of the big research project. So these were not in some kind of textbook, or there were so many fragments. So even collecting everything, and then the curation is something we are still working on, because we want to have different ways of accessing the archive. But we started with a very small budget. So now I'm using this Expressive AI and the cargo side that's more interactive as the launching pad to applying for more grants. But on the other side, I've also been working with some of the artists, for instance, with Paul Vanus, in restaging some of these. So the clip that you saw from Terminal Time, we actually had a live performance a few years ago in the cinema studies department. And it may sound very straightforward, but actually getting the code to work and basically simulating the original environment with the hardware and the software was a whole process. So I've been documenting that. We also have a handbook in case other artists who are, some media that are now semi-obsolete. We wanted to also create this repository as a memory archive too. And the recordings are basically also archiving the performance, the audience interaction, and so on. And this media, at the turn of the century, the artists were not as concerned with archiving and with leaving a digital trace. They were more ephemeral. So now we're trying to have a more lasting kind of record for historiographical purposes, for educational purposes, and so on. And I also created, actually using AI, some of the images on the website, because we wanted every page to give a different definition of what artificial intelligence is or could be. So you have different notions on every page. And so I have some background, artistic background. So I was also experimenting with AI to generate images for the website. Yeah. So it's kind of a multifaceted project, and it was very challenging to work with a minimal budget. That's why we had the symposium. We collected more contributions and more interest. But I wanted to make it as kind of accessible as possible, and to kind of start from scratch as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and you can post your website on the chat also, the link, please. And we will move to our next presenter, who should be, tell me please how to pronounce your name in the right way. Is it Anse Yanevica or?
Perfect, thank you very much. Yeah, Anse.
Anse, okay. Anse Yanevica, born in Riga, 1995. He is a designer of storytelling objects and experiences. She translates in deep research into meaningful narrative and experiences. Is a strong believer of critical and speculative design as a necessary tool to tackle complexity and with problems of this age. She graduated from Design Academy Eindhoven when the project Pollination Equipment and Powers of Disinformation. Previous education includes photography, textile, and classical arts. Currently pursuing a postgraduate degree at Royal College of Art and in Information Experience Design. For her dissertation, experimental work, a walk through communicating ecological complexity and immersive experiences, has been awarded a distinction. The current research focuses on exploring perspective alteration as a tool to better understand crucial dilemmas of this age. So please, floor is yours.
Yes, hi, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here among such brilliant people, first of all. So experimental walk, a walk through communicating ecological complexity and immersive experiences. Just one moment, I will close this one.
And please, who is not presented, please unmute your microphone.
Yes, very important. So, this is my dissertation for Royal College of Arts. I'm studying in information experience design. So we're gonna, like really fastly, we're gonna go through 5 parts of non-traditional dissertation, which is consists of 5 parts, each stands separately, independently. And yeah, so first part, climate crisis communication, part 2, taking a stand against erasure of species, part 3, perspective, part 4, technical illusion of immersion, and part 5, we're gonna, yeah, this kind of surprise one. So first of all, before saying, I'm really sorry about my jazz voice. I'm in the middle of terrible cold. It still exists. Don't worry about, we are socially distanced, it's all fine. Yeah, why? To be completely honest with you, I'm dealing here with my complete frustration about overusing term immersive experiences. Like everywhere where you look at the last 5, especially last 2 years, it's some sort of immersive experience when it's completely not, when it can be just screen-based. And secondly, it's about my lost hope in communicating complexity of climate crisis. So part one, climate crisis communication. I'm just gonna close this one. Yes, good. So I would like to start with this illustration of now. I think this image I found online 5 years ago, it's Californian wildfires, made by amateur photographer, perfectly illustrates the states that we are in. Like in the front, we see these golf players, which are not really taking care about what's happening there. They're just minding their own business, using their resources, doing their leisure hobbies. Then on the left side, we see the bystanders. Sorry, there's some sort of, I think some microphone is still off.
Yes, please, who is not a speaker, unmute your microphone. I see Diane Morin, probably.
Oh, good. So these bystanders, of course, looking in the fire, it's happening in background, but they're not taking action. They're just looking from safe distance. That is, they're not fully affect properly summons, and behind we see actually the people doing their job and fighting about it. I think like this first part of the dissertation is my try to understand how did we get here. Because of the climate crisis, it hasn't been like something was started yesterday. There is enough research out there from 80s, even 70s, and has been communicated to the public already in 90s. So one of my most favorite, if I can say so, is a work by Royal Dutch Shell. In 1991, they released 28-minute documentary about what impact fossil fuels does for the environment. So quoting, so the research included information about the rise of sea levels, disappearance of specific ecosystems or habitat destruction, and predicted runoff, desiccated floods, and inundation of low-lying farmlands. All these changes are creating changes that may be greatest in recorded history. And of course, like since then, the whole narrative completely flipped in ways that it's more like changing the society's attitude towards it. Really interesting, I think it's like still in 2021, Royal Dutch Shell is implementing really similar tactics. Just this time they are sponsoring as Our Future Planet exhibition in Science Museum for the children, for the younger generation. And it's quoting, can carbon capture help us fight climate change? Our latest exhibition explores technologies being developed to remove carbon dioxide from atmosphere. Of course, like when we talk about climate crisis communication, there's one of the most important players is climate activist groups. And like definitely the most known, Greenpeace. And lately, one was, at least in this part of the world, Extinction Rebellion, which is taking the stand. And talking about this type of communication, a lot of for general society, this is seen as too radical. So I mean, because it's too radical, people tend to kind of distance themselves from it. And in a way, like if you talk about what climate communication is out there, we have these fighting battles between scientists and fossil fuel industry. And then we have this super harsh communication from the activists, which is great, but a lot of times it's overlooked because of the tools that are being used. And if you talk about climate crisis communication, really fastly running through it, we cannot not mention the images of, images of extreme weather, because of these are the ones which you actually see in the media the most. And they all to some extent symbolize helplessness and may thus lead to disengagement rather than engagement, and with this issue of climate change. And yeah, one of this last actor, this image, which is really common for commentating complex problems, it creates this feeling that is distant, that we are not part of it. So to kind of conclude, you cannot solve crises that you do not understand. And it's up to us to find a communication strategies that express urgency of the current state of our planet and make us people feel that they are dependent on this little marble and that they can make actions that impact us. To solve complexity of the ecological crisis, we need to engage in new storytelling techniques. We need to learn how to take different perspectives and create engagement, not grief. So, of course, this is said by a lot of creators at this age. Now we move to the part 2, which is when we learn about fails and a little bit of the, not fails, those are climate crisis communication. We move to the art in times of Anthropocene. And here in front, we have Gustav Metzger, and I will quote him: "The art, architecture, and design world needs to take a stand against ongoing erasure of species, even there's little chance of ultimate success. It's our privilege and duty to be the forefront of the struggle. It is our privilege and duty to be forefront of the struggle." And here straight into, I'm gonna go in two exhibitions that deals with this. So both exhibitions mentioned share a lot of similarities. The exhibitions are calls for action and raise awareness of distant destructions. If we move past the ideological similarities and focus on technical aspects, we can notice that the most used term is immersive experiences. So say, in relation to climate change, immersive experiences and storytelling for the last years has been commonly used in communication. Why? Firstly, it has been recognized that immersive experience generate remarkable and occasionally shocking levels of intensity. Sometimes it can almost feel like you are developing relationships with an artwork. Secondly, often to lack of tomorrow definition, vast amount of digital and analog experience can be called immersive. There's almost no possibility to say what is and what isn't, and it can be based on purely individual experience. Let's take a step back. Like probably my viewer or listener in this case thinks that I'm blindly following the trend here. Yes, but actually, like, I disagree. Like, I completely disagree that there's this thing about everything, like, that we call digital experiences the most immersive thing that we can imagine, or like the most experience, like, time scale that it is out there. Like, I think, like, taking a simple walk in a forest, like in the best back of your house is the most immersive thing that you can experience, because you have fully surrounded spatial sound around you. You have the best possible resolution image. You have the smell and fragrance variety. You have the movement behind your legs that is completely adaptable. So why any artificial created experience can be more immersive than anything experienced in natural undisturbed ecosystems? And if you want to create this understanding, isn't there like just going out there and seeing natural environments, is what needed? And why should artists and designers invest any possible research to create immersive experience that don't stand close to having a real walk in forest? Why design visual world when you have the real one? Is it impossible to have better resolution in the one while having walk in the forest? Yes, and here, like, I argue against myself by probably, you definitely have seen this We Live Ocean Affair multi-sensory exhibition for Marshmallow Laser Feast. I don't fully agree it's immersive, but like just based on what was said in the press about it, the critique writes, we live in Ocean Affair while the use of AR and VR in museums and galleries may have its critics, like me. Its ability to expand audience, immersing them in message that artists is conveying is where the technology comes into its own. And when it comes to issues such as climate change, this may have the potential to have genuine real world impact. So maybe it's time to overlook and like think like what would be the best tools that we can communicate the urgencies of this age, because the these complexities that we have regarding environment. And yeah, and so sorry, I don't know. Here we move actually, like if you look back, the last bits of immersive storytelling has been part of the human nature, like for the last 20,000 years. Like in 2020, researchers discovered how the impact of impulses like cave drawings, because of when you walk in as a prehistorical 2,000-year-old human into these caves, what you were surrounded was this fully spatial audio, the sounds, the chants, the songs, the smells, what this gives this piece of body of the storytelling. And moving from there, And moving from there, this world would let us explore more about ourselves and take different roles and perspectives compared to everyday life. Another example was this historic immersive storytelling, what has been always part of our way of communicating is what I think masterminds is religious architecture and religious experiences, because one, even the medieval person would walk in the church, what you have sounded is different sensory inputs, multi-sensory inputs, which is candle smells, singing of choirs, colored daylight from stained glass windows. On the walls, you see biblical panoramic narratives, and the culmination in this church dome where you have this illusion of ultimate sky. If we are to improve the ways of living and being in coexistence with other species, we need to have personal relations with the environment that surrounds us. The way to develop these connections is through deep understanding. Designed immersive experiences offer possibilities to facilitate these connections with the worlds that are going to extinct on our own everyday eyesight. Immersion can create needed sense of wonder, appreciation, and understanding. It is a matter of quality of aesthetic experience and quality of narrative. It is up to artists and designers to design a meaningful experience and to use best practice techniques and tools for it that is available at this age. So here we move to the part number 3, as perspective as one of the answers to this complexity of problems. Perspective taking as a technique for curing human self-importance. Looking at the world from other species' point of view is a cure for a disease of human self-importance. So, in the last century, humans have made immense innovations, which they have led to worldwide climate emergencies, which threaten our very own existence. This geological age we are living can be defined as Anthropocene. Anthropocentrism has been the main viewpoint of the last centuries in religion, philosophy, and science. First of all, to restore what we have destroyed, it is urgent to understand fragile ecosystems and natural environments. We need to re-evaluate our own human perspective. To do that, we need to question what it means to be human. What perspective and how can perspective taking as a technique for immersive experience lead us to better understanding of natural ecosystems? So how do you know who you are? Let's start with that. Are you human? Are you microbiome colony? Because based on the science, like Gallagher 2018, we are 43% human, the rest is microbiome colony. And Latvian writer Imants has this wonderful short story about, it's called Learning the Art. It's about truth is on one hand, but on the other hand, it's the same truth. So it's like the realness, the right, like the truth is that we have to consider from all the possible sides. Considering ideas, conflicts, and arguments from one side only leads to misjudged issues. Considering the world only in an anthropocentric way has led to complex global scale problems humanity never faced before. If we are to learn about our current realities from different viewpoints, we need to deconstruct the term perspective and recognize how changing and reconsidering perspectives can contribute to designing better immersive experiences. So what does perspective mean? Like in one way, super simple word, of course, but it's interesting in this duality because of it has a technical term, which is art of representing three-dimensional objects on a two-dimensional surfaces. So it has to give impression of their height, width, depth, and position in relation to each other. And second definition is more intangible, if I can say so, and imaginative, a particular attitude towards a way of regarding something, a point of view. So in this chapter, discuss how these both definitions are interlinked, and like that both definition is needed, like each definition is needed to communicate in the best way. And really shortly, here we move to the main idea of this chapter, learnings. In the Renaissance, technological and graphical innovation gave possibility to communicate more complex and elaborate stories. Changes in technique led to possibility to express complex narratives. In Cubism, altering breaking rules of perspective changed the whole range of how story and story and reality is communicated in a work of art. It focused not just on accurate representation, but showed us that in order to understand reality, we need to look from several angles. Once more, a change in technique led to a completely new way of constructing narratives. Learning from both periods is crucial if we are to try to communicate complexity of the Anthropocene, if we are to understand reality, not just from our own human perspective, if we are experiencing technological changes of communication, changes in perspective influences how the narrative are told and gives possibilities to construct more elaborate compositions. Compositions which can lead us to understanding reality better than from our own single perspective. Here we cover a little bit of the technological innovation what happened even in Renaissance, of innovating perspective, new way how to present visual information led to huge jump in a way of concept, in a way of possibilities of information can be communicated. And like, maybe if we think in a similar way, like that, because right now there's plenty of new tools of storytelling. If we keep innovating our way, how we tell stories, it means that we can deliver way more improved, better, and innovative message. And just here, like, and if we are to make these stories, what we have to take in account different perspective stories is Umwelt of others. So the Umwelt is a term by Jakob von Oxford, Estonian German, a biologist, early 20th century, end of 19th century. The sensory perceptions that's special for and exclusive to each animal life from the Umwelt. Just really quickly, because if we think about, so we want to design a life of a fly, first of all, we have to make us an experience life as a fly. So we need to think about sensory apparatus that each animal would have. And of course, like one of the, probably your most amazing text, I think, is Thomas Nagel, How to Be a Bat. If we are to cure, if we are to cure the disease of human self-importance and learn to adapt the needs of this world, we need to learn about their words. We need to experience their ways of being in order to understand ecological complexities, technological innovations, and interlink with storytelling innovations. New tools and methods offer possibilities to tell stories in a more engaging way. To fully understand different perspectives, it's crucial to consider the sensory apparatus of each specific species. I'm encouraging to engage in experiments where we could challenge and reevaluate our ways of perceiving the world. Yeah, super short. Part from before, I talk about technological illusion of immersion, and just one quote. I found it in deep down in the VR forums. VR has been 5 minutes away from some kind of breakthrough for about 8 years. Truly believe it. And I think it's, yeah, well, let's leave it for the discussions. Last part, so when designing immersive experience for understanding ecological complexities, we need to consider history of climate communication to understand what works and what does not work. We need to understand that immersion is not a new way of communication, but one of the oldest forms of storytelling in human history. We need to learn from history of authentic, analog, immersive experience in storytelling. We need to consider non-human sensorial apparatus. We need to facilitate relationships for deep involvement in an engagement with planetary ecosystems. We need to examine aesthetic experience as a whole instead of separating the technological part and narrative part. We need to construct narrative from different perspectives in order to show the most involved representation. We need to employ the best storytelling tools available. We need to use tools because they convey the message in the most meaningful way, not for sake of using tools. We need to move out of our humanness. And finally, we need to return to our own humanness and reflect on it. Thank you very much, Paldies, and like, please questions or disagreements. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. If somebody has questions, you can raise your hand or write into the chat directly. Actually, probably I can ask you about your wonderful manifesto. Yeah, kind of statements as a manifesto. But could you provide, please, with some examples which respond to your manifesto?
Yeah, like in my own practice, I mean, of making them, I think like the same with what we have Rasa Schmidt and like what's right now happening in Latvian art. There's plenty of examples who does it. And it's just, and as well, like the mentioned marshmallow laserfish, to some extent it does it. And Gustav Metzger, it does it. It's just, yes, these are some of the examples which I think works for it. But in a way, like I think like I'm in this state of naive one day, another day, I'm like thinks that there's no need to communicate this Anthropocene subject because it's just not possible. So like, yeah, so that's why would be. And as well, I will post the whole text in the chat. So if you want to go a little bit in your own tempo, feel free.
Yeah, great. Please do it. So no one raised the hands by now. So please feel ask the question in the chat later, and even after reading your text, and we can move forward. We have Ilva Skulta. Do I pronounce right your name? Tell me, please. Ilva Skulta, a Dr. Philology Associate Professor, has a doctoral degree in the history of language from the University of Latvia. Since 2001, she has been working at the Department of Communication at Riga Stradins University, Latvia, and for the last years as a director of the master's program for communication and media studies. Having taught and written about history of media and reflecting the changes in culture caused by media, she discovered the importance of media literacies, including visual literacies and art. She has also worked as a cultural journalist since 2000. So please make your presentation. I see you. Okay. Can you unmute your microphone? Yes. Could you say please something, because we don't hear you? Or I don't hear you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, but could it be a bit louder, or could you be more close to the microphone, please?
Okay, I will try. Thank you for introducing me, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to the audience here. I will present my kind of first steps of study in the field that I think is very interesting, looking at the reading, and especially poetry reading as embodied practice. So my topic of the presentation, poetry reading as an embodied practice, interplay of senses and meaning of text, has been arising from the interest about media and poetry, and especially those experiments, poetic, both poetic and artistic, that are emerging in the field between both
literature or poetry and media art. My interest here to talk in this short presentation about embodied practices or reading as embodied acts is deeply connected to the fact that to the recognition of the importance of spectrum of senses in the understanding and actually experiencing poetry, even if it's published in traditional way in a book. But it's also kind of looking on different approaches and different fields that can actually elaborate this a little bit deeper, because one of the questions here, or actually main question, is arising from the practical work with analysis of text and performances. Especially, I will be using here examples from the experiments with word and sound and visual images by Riga-based Russian-speaking poet group artists who are in the field from the beginning of 2000. It established in 1999 and are still very much on the same way with their works as on my theoretical approach, or the theoretical, what I would call first steps in the field. As I said, poetry was always a sensory experience, even if we only use probably one sense of reading classical text in a book. In the form of associations, we always use a full spectrum of senses, and I think we can also see poetry as the first place or space for experimentation and research on this sensory aspects of reading. As one example, and I think one of the best examples, is this video that I will not show, but you can see it's actually only slightly more. It's the kind of vernacular poetry where the author has captured the situation, the position of two building industry cranes, and this actually is building a letter. So you can say that in a way, poetry as an activity, as a poetic or artistic activity, is always based on very active sensing of the environment and of the movements and the resources in that environment, so that actually this environment read in special form, poetical form, is building the poetry. The idea is that the poet is the first reader of poetry that he's later translating to the wider audiences. So let's start with reading. First of all, I would like to point on the fact that probably we are approaching the line or the border that is based on classical body-mind dualism. And there are a rising field of theorists that are, especially literary theorists also, who are pointing on this locking opportunity to step over this body-mind splitting, because when reading, we are doing something with our eyes and hands, and those kind of things that are outside the processing of words and letters are sometimes not only influencing what's actually being read, but also actively being part of how the meaning is created and meaning is related to the bodily feelings of and emotions. So let me quote McLaughlin here, who wrote in his book Reading and the Body, the physical practice of reading. I'm quoting: literary theory has tacitly framed the act of reading within a simple body-mind dualism, ignoring the eyes and hands, the postures and habits of reading, and denying any connection between the transient life of the reading mind and the immanent life of the body. So the immanence of the body life is an important issue here. Attentive to this, but coming from different fields and coming from different point of view, the new literacy studies in the late 1990s and in the beginning of 2000s were discovering the multi-modality of the reading forms and environments in contemporary multimedia situations. So we are actually coming to age where people are reading a lot, even if they are not thinking of it as reading. But reading is occurring in very different way, situations, media, and in different modes. So by quoting Monte, one of the leading scientists in the field of new literacy studies, forms of imagination are inseparable from the material characteristics of moods. So he's pointing on the material and material side of moods, from their shaping in society's history and from their consequent interaction with the seriousness, senselessness of our bodies, introducing a concern with materiality and the senses into representations of the long-standing separation in Western thinking of mind and body into severe question, and therefore challenges the reification and consequent separation of cognition, affect, and emotions. So the studies later on reading, especially in the field of literacy studies and in the field of also early literacy studies, are very much helpful and rich in forms of approaches and reflection on the topic. And I especially would like to present here ideas by Anne Mountain and Norwegian scientists and Adriano van der Biel. I think the most important point here is that we should come back to the experience. So this is also important to experiment and get the analysis out of those experiments. What the poets who are using a lot of imagination and intuition are doing here. But we should also see this approach as bottom-up approach, but not losing sight on the complexity, because the keyword here is that today we are really living in the very complex situation by complexities, including mountain and wonder wheel, consisting of text, substrates, technologies, and reading processes and their outcomes. So I actually turned my attention to the work of Anne Mangan because of her interest in haptics. So she was also studying writing and reading, both by lessons, the notion of hands and reading and writing with hands in not only moments and other trained aspect of reading is important here, but the whole multi-modality that actually interacts with the material world outside. So this interaction is important when we are looking at the term that is actually marked by the multimedia and electronic books. So it is important to understand what exactly happens when the physicality of text is lost. And still the role of haptics is not lost at all. So the role of haptics is important in cognition as such. So here I put one of I think very interesting examples of how artistic work can actually reuse wide-known traditional texts by making them touchable. HASSAPOPOULOU is the artist based in Jūrmala, Latvia, and she created an artwork where the audience could interact with texts of traditional Latvian poet Oksana, who actually was writing in the end of 19th, in the beginning of 20th century, is very well known for kids as well as grown-ups as one of the classics of Latvian literature. She tried to make this poetry interesting for kids, not by introducing videos on screen, but letting kids play with writing over the lines of the poetry of Oksana and doing different things. This touch, I think, and going through the writing process and reading process all together was interesting experience, and also interesting experience that took left the light on the reading process itself as something touchable, as movement, and as a production of both materiality and information immateriality. So Mangan and Bartner-Veal propose different dimensions of reading, how we can actually proceed and see and understand reading in a more proper and more complex way. First aspect is connected to this being in mass and haptic and other senses, and this is called ergonomic dimension. Of course, to understand how the reading is happening, we should pay attention to the attentional and perceptual dimension. Another level, another aspect is cognitive dimension. The questions of meaning making are especially connected to this, but for poetry text as well as text online, for example, the emotional dimension is also very important. And
I'm sorry to intervene. We are running out of the time.
Okay, good. I will just go quickly through my slides. So then later on, phenomenological dimension, social, cultural dimension, cultural evolutionary dimension is also mentioned, and the authors also see the act of reading in three different factors: embodied interaction plus mental interaction and environmental factors are also important here. Another approach to understanding of reading as active act and embodied act another explanation is given by simulation theory, where the idea is that the understanding of linguistic text of speech is actually done through empathy and simulation of the situations of where the experience of the similar or analogous situation is taking place. So this is again a very bodily situation. And going closer to my point of interest, the poetry, here we can draw on the theories that is well known from the 80s, the conceptual metaphor theory by Judd Lakoff and Johnson. So metaphor is essential for poetry, and we can actually break down conceptual metaphors to the primary metaphors that are based on embodied experiences very often that we learn in the childhood, but there are cross-culture and that actually structure our thought and allow us later on speak and talk and understand each other and build other kind of metaphors, idioms, metonymies, and etc. And especially play with that and make novelty. This is why I actually thought to devote the last part of my presentation to the practical works by RIXC. Because I think what is important is this unknown that is achieved, that is approached by the playing with different senses. In the work, for example, by Vladimir Svetlo, they managed actually to do it even in the traditional medium of book. This is, for example, book consisting from text in three languages, but also visual language of photography and also graphics that is directing and making sense in terms of breaking the traditional attitudes and bringing new associations of breaks, for example, or pain or something like that. Another book that I wanted to present is an Untitled book from 2013. It's seen as a traditional poetry book, but both books were in Latvian and Russian. A version were held together by a magnet that actually evolved the not only haptics but also this kind of energy and power approach by the sorting the illustrations in the book were making were appearing as a distorted poetry lines, but were also turning the reader back to the question of what exactly reading is and how it actually proceeds.
I'm afraid that we have to stop already here because we still have two presenters. So please make conclusion, and probably we don't have even time for questions. You could communicate questions probably via chat. So if somebody has question for Ilva, please write down on the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Sorry for the interruption, but this is like my duty. We have the presenter, Claire Diash. Do I pronounce right? There is no biography. There is a statement, but you can introduce yourself by your own, please.
Hi, thanks for having me. And yeah, really interesting talk, Eva. My name is Claire Breach. I'm also sorry for attending late. There was an internet issue, which was very frustrating, but I'm here now. So thank you for your patience. So I think I should share my screen.
Probably Ilva, you should close your screen demonstration. Please do it. Is Ilva still here?
Sorry? Should I just share my screen or?
Your screen, we can see your, oh, okay, no, I'll
That's
stop
not my screen.
Hold on one second. You should be able to share now.
Okay, great. Oh, it says screen sharing has failed to start, which is strange. Let me see.
Okay. Still no luck? There we go, we see it.
Oh, okay. I decided to press play so that you would instantly get the full screen effect, but for some reason Zoom didn't like that. Okay, so I'll press play now. Wait, that's not the first slide. This is it. Okay. Hi, my name is Claire Breach. I'm 25 years old. I was born in Belfast and grew up in the north of England. I'm currently living in London as well, and I'm an artist who does sort of, I don't really want to reject anything or sort of be discriminate and, you know, sort of stick to a specific type of art. So I'd say I'm probably, I guess I fit into the category of multimedia artist. And I want to find meaning in the meaningless. I Actually, I think I'll read out the piece of text that I originally sent to the RIXC. Let me find it. So it was basically about, the piece of text was about a character that I'd made called Peanut Head, and sort of how they came to be and their meaning.
So please go ahead. It's about 7 minutes left.
Okay. I'll just get straight to it then. I want to find meaning in the meaningless. I avoid starting art with set intentions of conveying particular meanings, because complex meanings can be derived from just about everything, which I want to draw out like an animal from its den. I aim to exploit intricate technical means of art making for intuitive and democratizing means. Characters and shapes are disassociated from their original purpose, by which the systems in which they typically function are exposed. My influences are always changing and consist of too many things to list, but I'm inspired by Frank Sidebottom, as well as the naive clunkiness brought about by the technical limitations of early CGI. So that's a sort of introduction, sort of artist manifesto of sorts. I want to begin this presentation by talking about mascots. And characters become mascots when their image becomes decanted for a common public identity, such as school, professional sports team, society, military unit, or consumer brand. If these characters have initial stories and background, these stories often become obscured or forgotten through this decantation process. Many of these mascots don't have stories, but still exist for just representational means. And I feel pity for these characters that just become vessels of kitsch. And I think Hello Kitty is a good example of this, because she doesn't really represent anything. It's just like feeling affection for nothing. And, you know, despite, you know, these are quite cynical thoughts, but I do love mascots. They, you know, by their simplicity and ability to bring joy and excitement by their existence. Their designs are enjoyable, and we don't necessarily equate our enjoyment of the designs with the brand itself necessarily. At least I find as an adult, I don't do that. And yeah, these thoughts were sort of in the forefront when I was creating this character, my own mascot, Peanut Head. And Peanut Head's, this is Peanut Head. This is sort of like a, I guess, image sort of artwork I made to sort of promote it. And I originally created Peanut Head to attend underground music events that surfaced online during the pandemic, such as New Synosis and Hurt Free Network. Video unavailable. But yeah, you can just about see in the background, there's Peanut Head. Like sort of among all of these like cyberpunk avatars. And I basically the character of Peanut Head. Oh wow, it started playing. So if we skip here, we can see Peanut Head dancing. So this is Golden Boy playing the music. And I wanted a character that was evocative of rhubarb. So I settled for an oblong yellow headed alien with 3 pink stalks as antennae, big leaves for arms, and a simplistic prism for a dress. It was inspired by the sort of CGI imagery seen on rave flyers and releases from the late 90s. And I created this avatar for the virtual chat client IMVU, which is where this rave is hosted. And I felt a bit out of place in these events because, as you can see, a lot of these characters are like very slick, whereas Peanut Head is just very, very clunky. And I think this is because I wanted to make Peanut Head entirely from scratch. And you know, these are for avatars are sort of customized to the max from assets that you can buy from the shop online, which is something I didn't reject entirely because I actually bought an asset myself, which is some Digimon that I surrounded myself with. But I mean, and also just the process of making it from scratch was just so laborious. It was worth it, but I think it was very discouraging as a result. But I loved the clunkiness of Peanut Head.
And I'm afraid that I have to interrupt you here because we still have fifth presenter and we need to leave time for him. We had technical problem at the beginning, so kind of apology about this, but thank you for the presentation. If the audience has questions, please post it in the chat. And we still have a bit of time for our last presenter. Thank you, Claire.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Arok Perez, do I pronounce right your name? Tell me, please. Is an interactive communication artist and researcher